Have you ever seen the rotating wheel of a potter? It is appropriately called the potter's wheel, that machine that the potter uses to rotate an insignificant piece of clay to create a work of art that might never be equaled. The potter fashions this insignificant piece of clay with his very hands, and nothing escapes unless the hands of the potter allows it. Let us take an imaginary journey on the wheel of the grand potter that fashions every insignificant piece of material into unparalleled art. Let us take a look at the hands that fashioned everything it contains. Let us take a look at space. Space is the medium in which matter and energy exists relative to the passage of time. The nature of space is to contain matter and energy within a time frame. Everything that exists in space is wrapped around by space. For matter or energy to move inside the wrap of space, a force has to be applied to the matter or energy. Space resists any movement or change in movement inside of that space, with a resultant force proportional to that force of its movement. When a force is applied to matter or energy and movement is created inside space, the wrap of space resists it with a proportional force of resistance, creating its gravity. Space will slow down any movement inside of it because of its mass in contact with the moving body. It grabs on as a wrapper would do with a moving body inside the wrapper. The opposing resultant force of resistance created by space on the moving body, wrapped inside of space, causes the mass to be wrapped relative and opposite in direction to the force created by the movement of that body. Rotation inside space generates an outward push away from the center of that rotating body on anything on the surface of that rotating body. Space resists this movement with an opposite force because its mass is in contact with that body. This opposing force is relative and directly proportional to the mass, speed, density, and composition of the body. This force is a push opposite to and directly against the generated force. This resistant resultant force is gravity. Gravity attempts to slow down all movement of matter and energy inside of space. The force of gravity is a push against any force created by the movement of matter or energy contained inside of that space. The force of gravity is a push toward any opposing force inside space and not a pull created by movement. Gravity is created when a body tries to move inside space. If the movement is centrifugal, then the body wraps itself tighter or less tighter, proportional to the centrifugal speed, density, and composition of that mass, and gravity increases or decreases proportionally by squeezing the body as space wraps itself more or less during rotation. The gravity on a body in space is a push from the space that surrounds it towards its center, resisting the outward movement of any expansion of the body or outward movement of everything on it. Everything is pushed back to the center of rotation. Gravity attempts to stop the process of change in the tense of time and opposes the movement of time itself and everything trapped inside that time frame. Space and gravity are relative to each other within and because of the movement of time. Gravity slows down any movement of a mass because of the contact with that mass and the mass of space. The force of gravity acts directly opposite to any force that is applied on a body inside of space. The force of gravity is increased as movement increases.
Where space itself is thinned or less concentrated, the surrounding mass of space pushes all matter and energy toward the center of that area of less concentration with a force equivalent to the immense pressure of the entirety of space relative to time, in black holes. Time interacts with space at the speed of time, and all matter, energy, and space is reconverted into time at this point of interaction. The relation of time and space, however, will be touched in the next upcoming video. Let's now take a bold journey into a new line of thought: rethinking gravity. If these points are valid and true, then gravity is neither caused by the falling of a body inside the warp of space as Albert Einstein proposed, nor is it a pulling force towards the center of a planet as Sir Isaac Newton proposed, but rather a push downward from space all around the surface of the rotating mass. As the mass of space wraps it relative to the force generated by its rotation, it squeezes everything on the rotating mass together, similar to a candy wrapper being tightened, as if the candy is wrapping itself up by spinning inside the wrapper. However, when a mass rotates inside space and space squeezes the rotating body, pushing everything on the rotating body toward the center point of rotation, The squeeze is not equal on the entire surface of the rotating mass because the rotating mass rotates on an axis, creating two axis points or poles. A stronger force will now be experienced on these points because of the concentration of the force of gravity on a smaller surface area. Just as the ends of a candy wrapper tighten in a concentrated force at its ends, this pushes the poles closer to the center of the rotating body, sometimes flattening the poles. This phenomenon explains why gravity is observed to be more at the poles. Therefore, the poles are flattened as a result of the concentration of gravitational wrap from space acting on a point of axis, pushing it closer to the center, and gravity is not greater at this point because the poles are closer to the center of the Earth. It is a fact that deep ocean basins closer to the center of the Earth have lower gravity, and mid-ocean ridges have locally high values of gravity. On rotating bodies in space, the gravity increases if its speed, mass, or density increases, because space is being wrapped up by the rotating body relative to the force of movement of the moving mass. The phenomenon of orbit is caused then when two rotating bodies in space come into proximity that causes their outward centrifugal forces to be equal and opposite enough to cancel each other out by pushing on each other like two like poles of magnets. The equilibrium causes space to treat both bodies as one unit, as though the one with less centrifugal force, the lesser, is resting on the other with more centrifugal force, the greater. Hence, the wrap of space keeps them both together, locked in the rotation of the greater orbit is formed. This also explains why no submoons have been found orbiting any of the moons considered most likely to support them while they are locked in orbit with a planet. On rotating bodies in space, the gravity increases or decreases if its speed, mass, or density increases or decreases because space is wrapping tighter or slacker relative to the force generated by the moving mass. If any one of these rotating bodies should change speed, mass, or density, then the orbit will be affected.